Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. It is that time again. It is time for House Talk Pregame. I am your host, sports mental health empowerment coach, Dr. Lauren Pitt. I have my awesome co-host with me today, Ronnie Ransom. Andre and Jared are not able to be with us today, but as usual, Ronnie and I are going to hold it down and do our thing so that we can get this knowledge to you all, and we are so excited about it. Oh, my goodness. What a week it has been. Goodness gracious. There has just been so much stuff going on that, it's like, oh, gosh, where do we begin? But this is where we're going to begin. We're going to begin with letting you know that week after week, we pride ourselves on shining a light on our HBCU family and black and brown communities all over the nation. Why? Because that's what HB Pregame is all about. It's all about family. It's about your family. It's about our family. It's about our cultural collective family as black and brown persons all over this nation. And if I can say so, what a week it has been for black and brown persons all over this nation. It has just been off the charts, commemorative this week. And I will tell you,
man,
I love being a woman of color, but there's a whole nother level of pride that I felt deep down, and my uncle used to say, in my sanctified soul this week that is unlike anything I have ever experienced in my life. Folks, we are just beyond elated because, as you all know, we've been talking about it for months now. We are a part of the Heritage Sports Radio Network family. And, our relationship with HSRN and what we do here at Pregame, it really is all about helping you, our viewing and listening audience, to take the necessary steps to transform your lives and live the life that you love living in more educated and empowered ways. I found myself thinking all week, that the mind is a terrible thing to waste, and how, as people of color, the more educated we are, the more impactful we can be. Because as cliche as it is, what we know to be true is that knowledge really, truly is power. We want you to remember, as we're sharing this knowledge week in and week out, that if you don't catch us live right now, here in this very moment, you can also catch us on HSRN at 11 a.m. So right now, it's like we're competing with ourselves, Ronnie. We're right now at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on HSRN. We're also on HSRN at 10 p.m. on Saturday nights, and then again at 6 p.m. on Sundays. I'm humbled. I am humbled and just so thankful and grateful for this opportunity to reach out to the nation and to the world week after week after week, to have these powerful and at times very, very complex and intense discussions that we're having with our people. And today's show is no different. We got a show lined up for you today because, goodness gracious, Ronnie, tell them about it.
Thank you. And good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's having a wonderful Saturday so far. Like Dr. Pitt said, it has definitely been a roller coaster week. A lot of great historical highs. Also, unfortunately, finished off yesterday with an unfortunate loss, and this morning actually another unfortunate loss. Just real quick, want to shout out Hammer and Hank Aaron, the former MLB player who passed away yesterday. Was, and a lot of people still consider, is the home run king. He did it in an era where there was no such thing as steroids or PEDs or human growth hormones or anything like that. Just all natural, country strong. Shout out to Hank Aaron and his family. And also, this morning we learned that we lost Larry King this morning as well. Shout out to the King family. Our prayers and condolences are with you and your family through this tough time. And all those out there who've also lost loved ones, not only to COVID, but just lost loved ones in general. Actually, this week, I had 2 clients who lost loved ones this week, one to COVID and one to cancer. So, heart's been a little heavy this week. But, my prayers go out to everybody out there who's lost a loved one. Continue to stay strong. Continue to, to reflect and remember the good times you had with your loved ones and hold on to those memories. But like Dr. Pitt said, we have a great show lined up for you today. Today's show is going to be focused around communication and why communication is key. So some of the things we're going to be exploring is what is effective communication, not only in sports, but what is effective communication, period. Why is effective communication good in sports? What kind of obstacles can lead to good communication or poor communication? And if we do know that effective communication can foster and build great relationships with athletes and coaches and employers and employees, then why is it so hard for people to communicate or have effective communication? So these are some of the things we're going to be talking about today. And look, guys, we love your feedback. We love hearing from everybody. We enjoy engaging with our fans and our listeners every week. So look, during today's show, please, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please call in at 515-605-9744 or email us your shout-outs, questions, or comments to hcpregame@gmail.com. And also, if you're on Facebook and you're on Dr. Pitt's Facebook Live right now and you're listening in or tuning in, if you have any questions or you want to chime in on the conversation, leave a comment on her live and we'll make sure we get to it throughout the show. So, look, guys, every week we talk about, diagnoses and things like that, with me and Dr. Pitts being clinicians in the mental health field. And, the last 10 or so months, everybody's mental health has been tested and strained to the max. I believe just this past Thursday, the 21st, Thursday the 21st marked the first 1-year anniversary of the first COVID case in the United States. And it's crazy to think how much has happened in the last year and how much, what we consider normal life and normalcy has been upended and uprooted. Basic things such as, communicating in close proximity with people is kind of like taboo almost. So what we strive to do each week is to introduce a diagnosis of the week to you out of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the 5th version, or the short word DSM-5. That is kind of like our holy grail for the diagnoses and symptomology of what you got going on mental health-wise. So this week we're going to be looking at somatic symptom disorder and related disorders. So somatic symptom disorder, formerly known as somatization disorder or somatoform disorder, is a form of mental illness that causes one or more bodily symptoms, including pain. The symptoms may or may not be traceable to a physical cause, including general medical conditions, other mental illnesses, or substance abuse. But regardless, they cause excessive and disproportionate levels of distress. The symptoms can involve one of the more different organs and body systems, such as pain, neurological problems, gastrointestinal complaints, and sexual symptoms. Many people who have somatic symptom disorder will also have an anxiety disorder. People with somatic symptom disorder are not faking their symptoms. The distress they experience from pain and other problems they experience are real, regardless of whether or not a physical explanation can be found. And the distress from symptoms significantly affects daily functioning. Doctors need to perform many tests to rule out other possible causes before diagnosing somebody with somatic symptom disorder. The diagnosis of somatic symptom disorder can create a lot of stress and frustration for parents. They may feel unsatisfied if there's no better physical explanation for their symptoms, or if they're told their level of distress about a physical illness is excessive. Stress often leads to patients to become more worried about their health, and this creates a vicious cycle that can persist for years. Several conditions related to somatic symptom disorder are now described as illness anxiety disorder, formerly called hypochondriasis. I hope I said that right. People with this type of people with this type of preoccupied with a concern that they have a serious disease, they may believe that minor complaints are signs of a very serious medical problem. For example, somebody who's experiencing a headache or a migraine might start to experience severe anxiety that they might have a brain tumor or a brain aneurysm might be coming. Another form of somatic symptom disorder is what we call conversion disorder, also called dysfunctional neurological symptom disorder. This condition is diagnosed when people have neurological symptoms that can't be traced back to a medical cause. For example, patients may have symptoms such as weakness or paralysis, abnormal movements such as tremors, unsteadily gait or seizures, blindness, hearing loss, loss of sensation or numbness, seizures, and also they also might experience irregular stress. Another one that they have is other specific somatic symptoms and related disorders. This category describes situations in which somatic symptoms occur for less than 6 months or may involve a specific condition called pseudopsoriasis, which is a false belief women have that they are pregnant along with other outward signs of pregnancy, including an expanding abdomen, feeling labor pains, nausea, fetal movement, breast changes, and a cessation of the menstrual period. When we talk about something like this, and I'll be honest with our listeners out there, and every clinician out there, people ask us all the time, what about this and what about that? My first answer is if I've never heard of it or I don't have any experience with it, I'm not going to give you an answer right then and there. I need to do some research first. I need to look up on it, read up on it, ask other people about it. So when I first heard of somatic symptom disorder, I knew it had to do with a part of the body. I just wasn't sure yet. But as I did more research and things like that, I've seen, people, throughout my life who have had, as soon as something goes wrong, whether they get a headache, they get chest pain. I think chest pain is probably one of the most common ones because when people think of chest pain, they automatically assume I'm having a heart attack. Yep. Like Fred Sanford used to say, every time you get chest pain, this is the big one. So, that's what made me think of it when I was reading up on it. And like I said, this is not, people aren't faking, Oftentimes, and Dr. Pitts is going to touch on this a little bit more in the treatment and resources part of this, but oftentimes, we always talk about in mental health how, your brain can be your best friend, but it can also be your worst enemy. So people who are suffering from somatic symptom disorders, it's almost like their brain is kind of like going against them. It's automatically assuming the worst possible thing with every physical condition or the thought of a physical condition. Like, for example, if you twist your ankle, somebody might think, oh, I've severed a bone or I've severed the artery down in my leg. My leg's going to go numb. I'm going to lose my leg, things like that. Just automatically going to the worst possible solution out there. So Dr. Pitts is going to talk with us about, resources and treatment for somatic symptom disorders.
I want to sort of expound a bit on the causes, the risk factors, and the complications before I jump into some prevention and what have you, because I think that it's really important for our viewer and listening audience to understand that when you're looking at these causes, right, the genetic and biological factors, family influence, personality trait of negativity, that's a huge one that ties into what you said about the brain being your friend or your enemy. Decreased awareness of or problems processing emotions, learned behavior. Every time you turn around, you dying, you near dead, you live at the ER, you live at the doctor's office. It can be really taxing, particularly when you have the responsibility of caring for someone that suffers from somatic symptom disorder. It can get on your nerves. To your point, Ronnie, I look back over my life and I'm like, yep, that's what that was. Didn't know it at the time, but oh my goodness, I have the people in my life that have actually said to me, you probably think I'm a hypochondriac, and I know you're sitting there analyzing me. Be first partaker of your own words, and if you are able to recognize that every time you turn around, you're at the doctor, the ER, everything's hurting. You need to really stop and do that self-assessment of what is going on that is keeping you in this persistent state of something being wrong with you. Because as Ronnie said, they're not faking. Like, they really think something's wrong with them. You know, you've heard the expression mind over matter. The mind is a terrible thing to waste. Well, for some people, they're so focused on every ache, every pain, every ailment that, I don't know about you, but I'll speak to how it works my nerves personally. It gets on my nerves. It just I've found, particularly as I'm getting older, you know, people always say your patience gets shorter when you get older. Professionally, I have a lot more patience and tolerance for stuff than I do personally. Personally, my family.
I would agree. I agree with that statement wholeheartedly. I'm the same exact way.
Yeah, like my family was like, "Oh my God, you are so mean. You're so insensitive." I'm like, "No, y'all getting on my nerves. Like, sit down. Do you know that I've charged for this information? Stop ringing my phone, asking me to assess you." And then when I say, you know, I'm not supposed to assess family and friends, you're like, "Oh my God, can you tell me what you think?" And then when I tell you what I think, you get mad. Really? What I'm gonna say? Where they do that at? Like, stop playing with me. But that leads me to the risk factors that contribute to this thinking and that lead to this disorder becoming up close and personal in the lives of some people. You know, when you're somebody who's already suffering from anxiety or depression, you have a medical condition or you're recovering from one, or you might be at higher risk of developing a medical condition. Of course, the first thing that comes to mind is that high-risk category for COVID for those persons. You have a strong family history of a disease. Wouldn't that all of us as people of color, like, we lead the stats on high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease. I mean, we lead the stats on all of those big ones just as people of color. Here's another one that is culturally relevant to us. Experiencing stressful life events, trauma or violence. Well, isn't that the story of our lives from, you know, how we came over here
centuries
on
ago.
Our backs in shackles and chains. Having experienced past trauma such as childhood sexual abuse. Well, that's a whole other show. And having a lower level of education and socioeconomic status. Okay. So basically, everything that I just said as a risk factor for this is prevalent in Black and brown communities all across the nation and all over the world. So I say that to say that really leaves us in a way predisposed to this disorder, which is why education concerning this is so important, which speaks to exactly why we do what we do. So some things that can complicate this and make it more likely that someone could develop this is poor health. Okay, well, check that off the Black and brown box. Problems functioning in daily life, including physical disability, problems with relationships, problems at work or unemployment, other mental health disorders such as anxiety, depression, and personality disorders, increased suicide risk related to depression, financial problems due to excessive health care visits. Just say Black and brown all day. Well, you know, it's like crazy the stuff that we are predisposed to just because we are Black and brown persons. It's just hard.
What we look like.
Yeah, it's craziness. But here's how we can prevent it, right? You know, little is known about prevention, but there are, you know, some things that we can certainly keep in the forefront of our mind. If you have problems with anxiety or depression, we are recommending that you seek professional help as soon as possible. We always put the disclaimer out there. We do not want you to psychoanalyze yourself. We do not want you to diagnose yourself. We want you to see a physician, a mental health practitioner that can properly assess you based on our professional expertise and training in evaluating these types of conditions. We also, and this is crucial, but again, goodness gracious, I feel like we get hit over the head with that every day of our lives because we're people of color. Learn to recognize when you're stressed and how this affects your body, and regularly practice stress management and relaxation techniques. Okay. You wake up black or brown in this country, there's a certain amount of stress that is present sitting on your chest when you open your darn eyes just because you're black and brown. Like, it's insane.
Exactly.
If you think you have somatic symptom disorder, get treatment early to help stop symptoms from getting worse and impairing your quality of life. And then stick with your treatment plan to help prevent relapse or worsening of symptoms. The biggest thing, the proactive measure that we want to recommend to you is we really, really, really want you to seek help. We want you to understand the importance of a strong doctor-patient relationship is going to be paramount in helping you to get a handle on this if you find that you do have disorder. Because the bottom line here, folks, is we're asking you to seek help from someone like Ronnie, someone like myself, because the focus of treatment is going to be on helping you to improve your daily functioning, not on managing the symptoms. Stress reduction is going to be important in order for you to get better. And as a marriage and family therapist, I will tell you that oftentimes you're going to find that family therapy is going to be recommended for you, particularly family therapy within the context of cognitive behavioral therapy, because it can help relieve the symptoms. It's going to help you to work to correct the distorted thoughts that you have about yourself, your circumstances, and what's going on in your body and your mind. It's going to help you to address the unrealistic beliefs that you have, and it's going to help you to address behaviors that feed anxiety. There's a level of accountability that comes, folks, in dealing with this disorder, and it's a hard pill to swallow, but you have to swallow it if you truly are committed to getting better. Look, folks, we know that these conversations are powerful, impactful conversations. We know you're sitting around your living room, on your porch, on your deck, in your socially distanced dining room. You know, you're having these conversations, and we want to hear from you. So we encourage you to call us live during the show at 515-605-9744. Again, that's 515-605-9744. You can always email us at hp3game@gmail.com. You follow us on social media. HP3Game has its own page on Facebook. We're going to be establishing a page on Instagram as well. You can follow our posts. We are putting a wealth, when I say a wealth of information out there to educate, empower, and liberate you, our viewing and listening audience, week after week after week. And we really want to hear from you to let us know, one, that you're being impacted and this information that we're sharing with you each week is helpful. And two, don't hesitate to let us know if there's a particular topic that you want us to do a show on. We're open and receptive to that as well. Wow. Ronnie, you kicked it off talking about, the news that's going on this week. But before we do that, don't you got some business you want to shout out?
Yes, I do actually. So each week we are going to be shouting out Black-owned businesses, alumni of HBCUs. So I have a special shout out today The business I'll be shouting out is one of my former teammates from Virginia State University, goes by the name of Jamil Haley. So actually, going into his senior year, Haley created a clothing brand called Humble Beginnings. And the mission of Humble Beginnings is that they take pride in being a clothing line with a purpose. We will continue to bring quality street fashion while pouring back into the children in our community. Every win we receive is a win for the future. So they specialize in shirts, hoodies, sweatsuits, children's clothing. His clothing company makes custom shirts for family reunions, graduations, parties, gender reveals, the whole 9 yards. One of the things I like about Haley's company is that once a year they do a scholarship fund. Last year was the first year they did it. They're doing it again this year. And the scholarship is a $500 scholarship to any high school graduating senior who's attending an HBCU anywhere in the country. So how you apply is you'll send in, I think they have an essay question. You'll send your essay response in, and they normally pick one. I think last year they ended up picking 2 winners, but typically they pick one, and that $500 goes towards your tuition at a HBCU. Another thing that he does through his company is they do a Thanksgiving drive every year. Every year they sponsor anywhere from 4 to 5 families. They get all the food necessary for Thanksgiving and things like that. And during Christmas, they also sponsor a couple families. They get their kids' Christmas list, and they try to get as many toys on that Christmas list as possible. This past Christmas, actually, they had a kid who wanted a PS4, and one of my teammates actually donated his PS4 to the family. So that was very nice of them. And also, they also do day parties throughout the East Coast. They've done one in D.C. They're actually doing one next month in Atlanta, God willing that, things can be open and whatnot. And oftentimes they'll take the proceeds from the day parties and donate them to various charities and other community organizations. So how can you get in contact with Jamil Haley's business? So if you have Instagram, his Instagram handle is _Humble Beginnings _. That's _Humble Beginnings _. He also has a website where you can go to purchase all the clothing that he has on his website at www.hbbrand.net. That's www.hbbrand.net. So if you're on Instagram or Facebook, go check him out. Nice quality clothing. I have a couple shirts from him myself that I've actually bought when he first opened the company. They're still in great quality. They haven't shrunk. They haven't stretched. He puts his effort into it, and it's starting to show. So I'm proud of him. Shout out to Haley and his company, and I wish many blessings upon it as you continue to grow out here, man.
Nice. Love it. So look, there's so much going on in the news this week. We can't even begin to touch on it all. So just going to touch on a couple of key things real quick. You paid homage to the loss of Hank Aaron and Larry King, and as Ronnie said, our deepest condolences go out to both of their families. How about the first woman of color being sworn in as the Vice President of the United States of America? How about it? Oh, my goodness. I just, even now, saying it over again, I get chills and I get so full because I think about all of my loved ones that have gone on and how they wouldn't believe it. We would never have a black president, and we definitely would never have a black female. But they're like, you crazy. They're just,
any level of that office.
No, indeed. They're like, yeah, okay, you're what, smoking something? Look, or are you running a really high fever and you're delirious? But yeah, that's never going to happen. So to be able to bear witness to such a historic moment is just absolutely phenomenal, and I just count it an honor and a privilege to be a woman of color and to be, in this company of such greatness and excellence as a woman of color. And that leads me to the next woman of color. How about Amanda Gorman? Did she bring that? The first thing that came to mind was poetic justice. I said, "Oh my, look," and Dr. This big old crybaby. I'm crying. I'm crying, and I was just floored. I was floored, and I'm watching CNN, and just to see these white men and women at a loss for words, and how extraordinary this young woman was. I mean, it was just phenomenal. And to see her interview on CNN with Anderson Cooper was just, and he's got a heart of gold anyway, and he's real emotional, and he was just like, what, just speechless. Like, what, it got to a point where he was just like,
it was powerful.
Say? Yeah.
It was very powerful and very needed.
Harvard educated, I love her transparency in talking about her own speech impediment and how she didn't allow that to stop her quest for greatness and excellence, that she already has her sights on the White House for 2036. I was like, proud mama moment.
We here for it.
Moment.
We are here for it.
Yes, and it's like, oh my goodness. With Vice President Harris and Ms. Gorman just taking the world by storm this week, if that doesn't serve as encouragement to little black and brown girls all over the world that they can achieve greatness and excellence, I don't know what does. I absolutely positively don't know what does. And I'll say this and then we can move on. Something else that I thought about too that's related is, as I was reflecting upon Hank Aaron, it's ironic because I didn't get off work until late last night, and part of how I decompress and my self-care is I'll watch documentaries on Netflix. So when I shut everything down, I hadn't heard yet that he had passed. I didn't find that out until this morning, first thing. And I was watching a documentary everybody needs to see, The Godfather, on Netflix, but it's about Charles Avant. And there was it's like 2.5 hours long, but it is, I literally, Ronnie, I was sitting up hugging my pillow in the middle of my bed, like sitting on their every word throughout this entire documentary. But Hank Aaron is in the documentary, and he's talking about Charles Avant. Yeah, he's in it. He's talking about Charles Avant and the extraordinary relationship that they had, and it reminded me of this. For those of you that have been to the Hartsfield Atlanta International Airport, I don't remember which terminal it's in, but when you're coming up one of the really, really, really long escalators, there's this beautiful, beautiful picture of Hank Aaron and his wife. It is breathtakingly beautiful, and I was reflecting upon, I said Charles, it's Clarence. My fiance just corrected me, forgive me. It's Clarence Avant. Thank you. It is just the most beautiful, beautiful portrait of Hank Aaron and his wife, and I was just sort of basking in the beauty of that last night, and to wake up this morning and find out that he had passed. So just truly just greatness, truly, truly greatness. And I have a call to action before we get into our communication discussion for the last hour of this show. I'm writing my call to action for our viewing and listening audience is, and I don't remember, I think it was Van Jones and Don Lemon who said that Amanda Gorman is not, in essence, I'm paraphrasing, on an island by herself. There are thousands of Amanda Gormans and thousands of little Ronnie Ransoms and little Hakeems and Israels and Ishmaels and Chuckies, and there are thousands upon thousands of little black and brown children all over this nation and all around this world who the torch must be passed to. Hank Aaron represented a magnitude of greatness and excellence that, in my opinion, is comparable to that of Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Rosa Parks and so many of those pioneers of the civil rights movement that paved the way for us to be on the airwaves, that paved the way for us to be on the field and on the court and on the baseball diamonds and in the White House and Congress and Senate and entrepreneurs and all of these extraordinary things that we as people of color are doing. It's time for us to step up. It's time for us to embody the magnitude of greatness and excellence that was demonstrated by the pioneers that paved the way for us. An exorbitant amount of blood and tears were shed so that we could be afforded these opportunities that we have. It's time for us to step up as a people. It's time for us to come higher. It's time for us to unite and move forward in extraordinary, great, excellent, and memorable ways that puts the stereotypes to bed and that reminds the world that we hail from kings and queens, that as Maya Angelou said in one of her poems, and I don't remember the exact wording, but in essence she talked about, us having diamonds and gems flowing through us. That's who we are. That's our lineage as a people. And that's the mantle that we need to carry on and to march forward in as we begin this new year. And I feel like 2021 can be the start of the first day of the best days of the rest of our lives as a people. And for those that are thinking that they don't have what it takes to be great, I say yes, you do. It's just unrealized. I believe that there's a magnitude of greatness in all of us, but in some people it gets so suppressed that they forget or they haven't been made aware that greatness lies in them and runs through their veins every minute of every day of their lives. And as we continue to fight oppression in this country, we know that the forces of oppression are great, and they're designed to make us forget how extraordinary we are as a people. So we're going to remind you here on Pregame week after week after week of your greatness. And on that, we're going to talk about communication. Let's go.
Dr. Pitt, I swear every week the elegance in your words and the power behind the message. I don't have any hair on my head, but the little follicles stand up on top of my head, so that was powerful and very needed. And I was just over here, reflecting on the words you were saying, and, I accept that challenge. One of the main driving forces for me being a mental health practitioner is that I want people to know, those who feel that they've been given a raw deal, or those who feel like they can't do it, or those who feel like their life has no value or no meaning or no purpose, that it does. And not only, my generation and your generation, but for centuries, that's how we've been viewed. That's how we've been looked at. And it's funny you say that, because I don't know if you saw that the American Psychology Association came out with an apology this week, basically apologizing for the centuries of labeling black people as inferior or monsters or beasts. The founding fathers of psychology and psychiatry, experimenting on African American women and African American boys and children and men, and labeling them things that were just preposterous and just unrealistic and inhumane. And while you see these organizations and these, I'm not going to say cults, but these group of people who for so long have held the power in their hands,
Yes.
It's one thing to apologize, and that was one of the things I spoke to this week was, it's one thing to apologize. That's all cool and well. We always talk about, when you make a mistake, apologize. That's all cool and well. I want to see your actions behind that apology.
That's right. That's right.
It's one thing for you to apologize and say, we've stereotyped and we've judged and we've mistreated, a group of people for centuries. But where's the action behind that apology? Action behind, no action behind words means nothing to me. There's a saying in the Bible, faith without, work without faith is dead. It's one thing to pray and stuff like that, but where's the work behind that prayer? You ask God for a blessing, you ask him for a full meal and he gives you the ingredients, but you don't want to cook, So I accept that challenge, and I want our viewers and our listeners out there to understand that it takes us, and it takes us doing something that's outside of our own benefit. It takes having to bring our community back together, understanding that doing something out of the kindness of my heart. I'm not expecting anything in return. I'm doing this because I would want this done for me if I were in this situation, or this is the type of help I would give somebody in this situation. We need more of that in our communities. We need more uplifting. We need more, encouragement. So yeah, those words were very powerful. Not to go on a tangent or anything, but let's get into this week's discussion. And this week's discussion is centered around communication, and why communication is key. So when we chose this topic to talk about this week, I think this is probably one of the biggest pillars in, not only sports, but just in, the real world is communication. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's a working relationship or anything like that, the biggest thing that you hear people talk about is communication. And when we talk about communication in sports, why is that important? And how does that shape a team? What does that have to do with you winning a championship or winning a ring? It has a lot to do with it. I'll share my story when I got to state. When I first got to Virginia State, like we talked about last week, coaches will give a recruiting spiel out of this world. They come up with a script, they beat that script down into you. When you get to school, you'll get this, you'll get that. We'll do this for you, we'll do that for you, the whole 9 yards. One of the things I noticed about my coach when I got to state my freshman year was his inconsistency in his message. And when he would deliver a message to the team, one of the things I've always been, I always observe my surroundings when I'm new to something. So me being a freshman on the team and stuff like that, I don't have a voice on the team. I'm a freshman. I'm just going to keep quiet. And what I observed was, when the coaches were talking, when the coaches were, talking to us as a team, a lot of the juniors and seniors on their phones, sleep, not paying attention. And it makes you think like, well, dang, that's the coach. You're supposed to listen to the coach. The coach is, he's talking. That didn't happen. And as a result of that, unfortunately, I started to have that same mindset in a sense where it's like, when the coach is talking, oh, he's just talking. He don't really mean that. And and as a result of that, my freshman year we went 5-5, and then my sophomore year we went 4-6 behind ineffective communication. So when we talk about effective communication, what does that look like? And I was actually doing a lot of research on, communication and why it's the key to success. So I found this article it was from overseas, but it was talking about the relationship between positive communication and the results that teams have. And one of the things that it said was that over in Europe, European leaders did a study showed that poor communication is responsible for reduced performance in the business world. That studies emphasize why it's so important for senior management to be able to communicate effectively, with 41% of the employees believing communication improves productivity and performance. In the sporting world, it's no different. Better communication from coaches will result in a positive impact on performance. Mm-hmm. So share with us your thoughts, Dr. Pitts, on why you feel effective communication is important, not only in sports but also in the business world.
You know, and you all know that the whole communication piece is one of my pet peeves. You know, I feel like where effective communication is lacking, understanding is lacking. If you are not capable of communicating effectively, how can you be understood? How? You can't. You have to speak to be understood, not speak to be heard. And I think that a lot of people miss that. They get confused by that. If people aren't clear on the message that you're trying to convey, why would they pay attention to you? Why would they give you the time of day? You know, I think about when my speaking career started, you know, as a motivational and inspirational speaker, and all those years ago, goodness gracious, over 25 years ago. One of the things that my speaking coach said is always speak to be understood. Never speak to be heard. And the reason why, like that, in my mind, that runs really, 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 really deep. When you speak with the listener's understanding in mind, how much more powerful, how much more authentic, how much more sincere might what you're saying out of your mouth be? Let's face it, folks, words have power. Words can kill, and words can strengthen, and words can bring life. And when people fail in their ability to first and foremost understand the importance of speaking effectively and communicating effectively, if they don't place value on it, Ronnie, I honestly feel like they're never going to master it. I feel like effective communication is an area in our professional and personal development that we must master, because when we don't, it literally adversely affects every area of our lives. Every area of our lives. And let's face it, if you are incapable of communicating effectively in your personal life, why on earth would someone think that you're going to miraculously learn how to communicate effectively with your teammates or with your team if you're the coach? If you can't communicate effectively with your wife or your husband, how are you going to communicate effectively with your players? Communicate effectively with your players.
It ain't going to work. And I'm glad you made that point. You know, and when we think about, you know, communication in sports and stuff like that, I mean, you know, we typically think that, you know, the coach talks and the players listen. That's how we normally think of when we talk about communication in sports. But like you said, it's so much deeper than that. And, you know, for somebody, I played sports for 14 years. And, you know, I had various amounts of coaches. I had coaches who were big talkers and yellers and screamers. I also had coaches who never raised their voice not one time. And they got their message across the same exact way. And, you know, when we talk about sports in general, I feel like, and this, people might think this is very biased, but, you know, I have an argument behind it. You know, I think communicating in football is probably one of the most difficult things to master out of all the sports. Number one, probably being the most obvious point to that I will argue, is just the amount of players on any given football roster. You know, in the NFL, they have 53-man rosters. In college, you can have up to, I think, Division I, you can have up to 115 players on your roster. Division II and III, you can have, I think, up to 85-ish, somewhere around there. You know, basketball and other sports, baseball and things like that, anywhere from 15 to 20 players tops. And one of the things about football that's so unique is every position has their own set of communications that's different from the next position. One of the things that I had to learn the hardest from going from high school to college was just how important that communication was. I played a position, you know, playing center on the offensive line that tremendously relied on being able to communicate with the other four offensive linemen. You know, when we think about playing offensive line, you know, our goal is to protect the quarterback, you know, make holes for running back and give the quarterback enough time to throw to the receivers and things like that. But how do you do that if nobody's talking? So, you know, being able to communicate while, you know, during a play, before a play, and after the play was one of the things that took me about a year or two to really get the idea and grasp behind. And to that point, you know, when we talk about coaches and communicating, one of the things that when I think of, you know, what makes a coach an effective communicator, the number one thing that I hinted to earlier is consistency. You know, when I shared with, you know, earlier, my first coach, my freshman and sophomore year at State, he was very inconsistent in his messages. You know, he would say something like, you know, well, we got curfew at this time. But, you know, then you come do curfew checks, a couple players are out, they don't get punished. You know, or, you know, you're saying you're going to do this for us and it doesn't come through. Or even, I mean, sometimes he would lie to players, you know, to either get them on campus and stuff like that. I mean, just, you know, just little lies that had no business, you know, being said. So already.
And it sounds like in mixed messages.
Absolutely. And, you know, typically that's kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say all coaches do this, but if you're trying to get a kid out of state, you might tell them and promise them something that you know you can't guarantee, but you got them here now. They've already signed their letter of intent, so now they're kind of stuck here. You know, so it's really important for players to be able to trust their coach. But if a coach is inconsistent in their message, if, you know, one day, you know, they let something slide, you know, if practice got a little sloppy, you know, there was a whole bunch of penalties in practice and stuff like that. The coach didn't say nothing. And then the very next day, the first time there's a penalty in practice, now you got everybody running gassers up and down the field. Players are going to sit there and look like, so how's it going to be day to day? Are you going to be pissed off about this one day and then cool about it the next day? Where is it going to be? So, you know, being consistent in your message is number one. Number two, and I think really across sports, this is starting to kind of change, is, you know, of course, you know, we always say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And when we think about coaches, like I said, you know, when we typically think about coaches, especially in football and basketball, you know, you've got like Dean Smith in basketball, you've got Mike Ditka with football, Bill Parcells, Jimmy Johnson, these coaches who had boisterous voices, commanded a room, were very stern, very strict, very disciplined. It was their way or the highway. We don't see too many of that style of coaching nowadays. I think a lot of that, you know, I don't want to sound insensitive, but I also think that, you know, they have made sports a little more sensitive than it was even when I played. I say that because, you know, I've had teammates who you could yell at. You know, some coaches like to yell. You could have a coach who would yell at a player, and that player would get it. You know, I was that player where if you yelled at me, all right, you got my attention. I'm not going to make that mistake no more. You have other players. In high school, we had this running back when I was a senior. He was a sophomore, and he was already getting looked at by big Division I programs. I mean, athletic kid. I mean, nice. Just pure talent out of this world. But he came from a home where, you know, the family was abusive, verbally abusive and things like that. So our coach in high school was, our whole coaching staff in high school was very verbally abusive. They would say, I can't repeat a quarter of the stuff they would say, you know, to us during practice. And, you know, it was crazy to watch this kid who had so much life and enthusiasm in him, you know, on the field. When he would get yelled at, would literally shut down. And it was a completely different person. And
trauma response.
He was like that the rest. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, it was for him, a coach yelling at him was no different than his parents yelling at him. You know, automatically he thinks he's going to let somebody down. He's going to disappoint them. So now I'm extra cautious. I'm hyper vigilant on not disappointing that coach as opposed to going out there and playing free. And you start to see a lot more kids like that nowadays where, you know, if a coach yells at them or puts them down, you know, they'll feel put down. They'll feel left out. They'll feel like they're not good enough. And that directly affects their performance. You know, I've always felt like, you know, a coach should speak life into their players. A coach should be a motivating force. Now, granted, you know, I also know, looking from a coach's perspective, you know, they have a job to keep too. You know, they want to do good, you know, especially in the college and professional level. So you have that added stress. And that was one of the things that I was reading about where it talked about, you know, coaches being able to deliver messages in high stakes and high stressful environments. For example, a championship game. You know, if their team is down at halftime or if their team is down with a minute left in the game, how that coach delivers that message could directly impact how that game finishes. If his players come through in the clutch, or if it's another, you know, we were right there, we just didn't have players who were mentally strong enough and things like that. And, you know, it's always kind of an easy way for a coach to scapegoat the players, like, well, they just weren't listening or they weren't responding to my message. Well, as a coach, how did you deliver that message? How did you convey that message to your players? So, you know, coaches, it's a fine line for coaches of being able to understand their players, or as they say now, understanding the room, reading the room when you walk in there. You know, what type of players do you have on your team? Who, you know, does somebody have any struggles with trauma? Do they have struggles with, you know, being coached? Your son, for example, how were his coaches when he was playing sports? You know, you being a parent and, you know, watching him play and stuff like that, how was his coaches during practice and games if you were able to watch his practices?
So, you know, I'm a little different. You made some very, very powerful points that I'm going to tie into your question where Andre's athletic career was concerned. Certainly, you know, he had coaches that were yellers and close talkers and all of that. But I'm very, very big on respect. And it is people, I'm always concerned when people say you have to demand respect. No, you don't. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. What that ends up doing is it instills fear to a degree in someone, and I don't necessarily mean fear like you're going to bring harm, but, for example, in a coach-player relationship, there's a degree of fear and intimidation there because the coach holds the strings to your scholarship, you know, in some of those situations, right? So I think that the respect piece is key. There was never a time, Ronnie, that I can recall Andre ever sharing with me that he had concerns about how any of his coaches came to him. And I've never been a helicopter mom. And let me just go ahead and put that disclaimer out there. I've never been a helicopter mom. But there are just some things that I am just not going to tolerate. I'm just not. And
Absolutely.
Again, my reasoning for that is because of the point that you made about, you know, the young man that you talked about, how when the coach would yell, he would just shut down. I think that we are living, I mean, for real, we've always lived in a day and time where people should be more sensitive to what is going on in the athlete's life beyond the sport, but people are insensitive to that. And I think that part of the reason why people are insensitive to that is because nobody showed them that sensitivity, right? But there has to be a level of accountability and responsibility, particularly when we're seeing an increase statistically in the number of Black and brown children that are committing suicide. I think that coaches have a level of responsibility, which goes back to the numerous conversations we've had about there needing to be mental health professionals that are assigned to the athletic department at the collegiate level, and also really expanding that access to mental health support at the high school level as well as in the various professional leagues. There has to be this emphasis on mental health that hasn't been there. You know, we're seeing it a little push for it now in response to COVID, but how many professional athletes have killed themselves? How many collegiate athletes have killed themselves? How many high school athletes have killed themselves for a variety of reasons? And you must say, well, Dr. Pitts, what does an athlete killing themselves have to do with communication? It has every darn thing to do with it, because had they been able to talk to someone who was actually going to listen, we may have been able to save that life. And it's when you are getting into mental illness that we see prevalent in scholar and professional athletes. There has to be a level of trust. There has to be this understanding that one is safe enough to be able to have those hard conversations about what's going on emotionally. And before I finish that thought, I want to say, folks, look, these conversations are heavy-hitting conversations, okay? We want you to join them. You know, we invite you to call us live during the show at 515-605-9744. Again, that's 515-605-9744. You can chat us up on Facebook Live. You can email us at htpregame@gmail.com. We also encourage you to get the Heritage Sports Radio Network app. You can just go to the App Store and put in Heritage Sports Radio Network. It'll come up. Get that app so that you can hear us at 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. on Saturdays and 6 p.m. on Sundays to get this wealth of knowledge that we're sharing with you on every single solitary show. But back to the mental health piece, Ronnie, you know, some might think that it's a stretch to think that communication and mental health are related, but it's not. It's not. You know, I would imagine, and I want you to speak to it, you know, when I think about clients that are hiring me to help them to be mentally well, one of the first things that I have to do is I need to be able to join with them effectively. Well, how can I join with them effectively? I have to be able to communicate in a way that they understand. I have to participate in active listening, which is a critical part of effective communication.
Absolutely.
I have to be respectful of their culture, their race, their ethnicity, and all of their familial beliefs that govern how they live their lives and how they, you know, function day in and day out. As clinicians, if we are incapable of communicating effectively, I don't think that it's a stretch to say that we'll fail at being an effective clinician, because communication is such a critical part of our role in helping others to be healthy and to be able to be introspective and introspective of what's going on with themselves in a way that illuminates for them the steps that they need to take in order to be well. Ronnie, I think of communication as a bridge. I think of effective communication as a bridge to wellness. Your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree. And while you were saying that, it was just making me think about, you know, so when we had got a new coach going into our junior year at State, Coach Latrell Scott, one of the things that, you know, me and all of my teammates, we gravitated towards was his realness and his authenticity. You know, we had heard about him. We had heard about him at other schools and stuff like that, but until he got in front of us, and he spoke with a confidence. And I think when we talk about sports and communication and leadership and things like that, one of the biggest things for, you know, male coaches, and I would say all coaches across the board, female too, is speaking with confidence, speaking like you know what you're talking about.
Yes, yes.
It's one thing to be a coach and to be out there being the rah-rah guy and, you know, pumping your players up and hyping them up and stuff like that, but you're just talking out the side of your neck, and you have no confidence in what you're saying. And when the players realize that, then you start to attack the players because they're not respecting you. One of the things that Coach Scott did for us was, he had a vision and he had a plan of how he was going to, transform our entire program and not only change us as student athletes, but change us as young men coming into, adulthood. And, I think part of that attributing to his message and his communication was the fact that we were also winning, because when Coach Scott came in, he was very stern, very disciplined. He literally did not give you a chance to, to misinterpret his message to where it's like, he didn't tell you the truth from up front. And I was always the same, like, if you tell me the truth, I will work with you no matter what. But if you lie to me, I can't do anything for you. And part of that communication, a good, effective communication becomes trust. Because I have to be able to trust that what I'm telling you, like you said, that what I'm telling you or what I'm trying to convey to you, you understand, and you're not going to take advantage of that, or you're not going to misinterpret it and use it against me for your own personal gain and stuff like that. So that was one of the biggest things that he had to come in and change. And he was always consistent. He never wavered. He never wavered on the discipline. He never wavered on his words. He was a man of his word. And we gelled with that. We responded with that. And as a result of that, we started winning. But even
Bonnie,
as
that sounds like, not to cut you off real quick, but that my interpretation of what you're saying is that sounds like context is key.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when I talk about having a message and having a direction, when you're tasked as a coach to lead a team, where are you leading them to? It's no different than if you were a general in the military. If you were even a parent, where are you leading this group or this person to? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And he had an answer for everything. And one of the other things about his communication style is Coach Scott was very he was very loud. He was very boisterous. He was very commanding. When he talked, you listened. There was no, I've had coaches in the past where they just talk and talk and talk, and after a while you just tune them out. When he spoke, he said it one time, you had better listen, because if you didn't, there was consequences. But he used to always say, like, I don't expect y'all to understand what I'm doing. There's a method to my madness. And one of his first coaching points he came to us was, I'm here to create chaos. And when he said that, I was like, it's already kind of chaotic here. How much more chaotic can it get? But he wasn't talking about disorganized chaos. It was organized chaos. He created situations. He did certain things. I remember one time we were practicing, in the middle of practice, he told us get off the field and go in the locker room. Just leave, just get off the field. I don't want to see y'all no more. He just literally just went off, got off the field and everything. An hour later, he was like, all right, let's go back on the field and finish practice. And half the people had already started taking their equipment off and stuff like that. So we were really confused, like, well, what the hell is this? So we get back out.
Bipolar?
Hey, I think great coaches might fit in that spectrum somewhere. His whole point behind that is he wanted to make us uncomfortable. He wanted us to put us in a position that we hadn't been in before. And after practice and stuff like that, and he explained it to us, it made a lot more sense. So when we were in game situations and we were down by a touchdown or we were on our final drive and stuff like that, when he spoke, we listened and we trusted that what he was saying was going to put us in the right position to win. When I think of that, I think of, a coach like Bill Belichick of the New England Patriots. And, a lot of players will sit there and say that, Bill Belichick is probably the last of the old guard of coaches who are very stern, very disciplined. It's his way or the highway. He has everything meticulated down to the special teams players, what they're going to do every minute of practice. He creates certain situations that you might find yourself in once in your career, but he has you prepared. And I think having that plan and expressing that plan with confidence is probably one of the biggest things coaches can do to open that line of communication with their players. Go ahead. I see you ready to say something.
No, you're fine. It makes me think about the importance of a couple of things. It makes me think about the importance of balance in communicating when we're looking at the coach athlete relationship, but also in your personal life too. Having that balance. It also brought to mind the importance of conflict, or in your coach's words, that chaotic experience doesn't always have to be negative. There's value that can come out of the conflict that arises as a result of creating these chaotic scenarios that presents this opportunity to teach you how to handle it the right way. So to your point, when you're in these pressured situations in a game, you're not freaking out, oh my God, what are we going to do? You've already sort of role-played this experience so that you know how, to the best of your ability, based on the role play, that you can bring this to life in real time. And then I, as I'm hearing you talking, and my wheels are constantly turning, it sounds like the new coach created this space for communication to flourish openly because of this culture that he created in your team once he became the coach. And all of that is so powerful when it comes down to learning how to communicate effectively. It goes back to what I said about communication being a bridge. And I just wanted to add too, I got a question for you, Ronnie. As you were talking and you kept saying how, Coach Scott, is that his name?
Yes, ma'am, Coach Scott.
Coach Scott, it sounds like not only did he earn your respect and trust, but there was an attachment that you all had with him that, in my opinion, strengthened your ability to enhance your performance because you all understood him, and it sounded like he was taking the time to understand his players. And I want you to speak to that a little bit more about the importance that is involved in actually having a depth of understanding about the person that you're communicating with. And I say that on purpose because so oftentimes people communicate by talking at someone rather than with someone.
I'm glad you made that point, and that was going to be the next thing I said when we talked about players who might not respond to aggressive coaching styles or very in-your-face coaching styles. Coach Scott was very in your face. You know, he was very if he saw you slacking, if he saw you not doing what you need to do, he was in your face. You know, and he was getting on you. And this is and it just popped up in my head, and I want to make this point to players and coaches out there. One of the things he used to always say to us, and I even use this now when I'm talking to my clients now, one of the things he used to always say, he's like, if I yell at you or if I critique you, I'm critiquing your actions, not you as a person. So
that's good.
When I'm coming at you hard, getting in your face, telling you you're not putting in the effort, you're being lazy, you're not doing what you need to do, I'm attacking your actions, not your character. One of the things that Coach Scott did a great job of was becoming relatable to us as players. Coach Scott came from a low-income area. Coach Scott, he always talked about, growing up and, how he had to do for himself and how hard he had to work and stuff like that. And we gravitated towards that. One of the other things that Coach Scott utilized that was very good was he was very good at delegating responsibilities, not only amongst the coaches, but amongst our team leaders. And to your point about that, being able to, how do I communicate with every single player on the team, or how do I build that relationship? Because he was able to identify our team leaders very early, getting there, he was able to delegate responsibilities amongst those team leaders that held us accountable within the team. So that was one of the good things he established, was not only having accountability of us, but making sure that we had accountability of each other. And one of the other things that, he did a very good job of is we had players who didn't necessarily respond to that aggressive style of coaching. There was a person in that group who could respond to that style of coaching. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but a lot of coaches tend to do this, is if they have a player who might not respond to that style of coaching, they'll take it out on another player. And it's almost kind of like a mind trick, where it's like, if I take it out on this player who can handle it and you see how they respond, that player that you were trying to get that message to will be like, oh, well, he's getting on them, so I need to be able to do what I need to do so I don't get yelled at like that either.
Okay.
So that was another thing that he was very good at doing. Like I spoke about on the show before, we had a teammate who, unfortunately went through a lot of trauma at home and stuff like that. So coaches yelling was an automatic trigger for him. And, like I said, this teammate in particular, our coach used to always say, if y'all knew what was going on at home, y'all wouldn't look at him the way you did.
Right.
And one of the things he used to do is, instead of getting on him, he would pull him to the side and talk to him. But if somebody else in that group did the same exact thing, he's getting on them. Now, from the outside looking in, you might sit there like, well, dang, he's giving that player better treatment than I am. But that's why he would always follow up that message with, if you only knew what he had going on at home, you would understand why I do what I do. So he was very good at communicating that to us. He was like, I'm going to coach you all the same. However, I'm also mindful enough to know that this style doesn't necessarily work with every single person on the team. So I have other people on the team who can go talk to him because they're a peer or whatnot, and be able to relate to them and get that message through to him that I, as a coach, couldn't get through there because he sees me as an authoritative figure. He might be more conscious of coming to talk to me out of fear of what I might say or do to him as a coach. But having those team leaders being able to delegate and express that same message for him was very effective for us. And it built a trust and a camaraderie that, propelled us to new levels at Virginia State.
That brings it, you stay provoking my thoughts. So it brings me to a couple of other things that I think that our viewing and listening audience needs to be aware of concerning effective communication. And it's important in sports, but it's also important in our personal lives, right? People are defensive. People oftentimes come into conversations because they already have a trunk full of emotional baggage. And they're carrying bags too. Look, the trunk is full of emotional baggage, hands full, aren't just full, just on overload with their own junk based on their own traumatic experiences and heartaches and pains and sufferings in life, that they come into conversations not mentally ready to receive the message, regardless of how it's delivered. So one of the things that I would say to our audience is try to, and it can be a challenge, it takes practice, right? But try to be deliberate and intentional in entering any conversation with an open mind and an open heart, understanding that we each have to be responsible for our own feelings. And here's a key to this. I say this particularly when I'm counseling couples, but I also say it in family sessions, is that consider the source. And we hear that, right? It's almost cliche. But if you say something to me, Ronnie, that may require Dr. Pitts to take a look at herself and to do some reflection, right? That you said something that's going to help me to develop personally and professionally, but I'm all in my feelings and I'm all in this defensive posture stance. My question then becomes, would Ronnie ever say or do anything to deliberately hurt you? No. Why are you in your feelings? Why are you in your feelings? Why are you in your feelings when you know that the source of the information that was conveyed to you genuinely and sincerely is coming from a place of love? Now, here's where it gets gray, because some people, because they are passionate and care as deeply as they do, they forget in the midst of that passion, how to communicate in a way that what they're trying to say is actually going to be heard and understood, right? And my recommendation for that is to, like I do with the little kids, I'm going to need you to count to 10. I'm going to need you to count. But here's the serious part. If what I'm saying to you, if somebody said it to me the way I'm saying it to you, would I receive it without being all bent out of shape? It's old school. It's the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Well, the golden rule applies in communication as well. Just because I love you and care about you doesn't give me a license to treat you like I'm crazy because you did something that angered me. And then that's the other part of it, too. Take the you out of it and flip it and say, make it less personal, if that makes sense. And here's an example. Say you yelled at me because you were having a bad day or whatever the case may be. I understand that you may have had a bad day. And I know that you would never say or do anything to really hurt me. So I feel like I need to let you know that when anybody yells at me, it puts me in an uncomfortable headspace because it takes me emotionally to a place and space in my life that I don't want to be in. And that's very different than, don't be yelling at me, I don't know who you think you're going to do, we about to do. You know,
exactly.
We can all go there. We can all go left. But does that get anything accomplished? Is anybody hearing the other person? And then the other thing that I just wanted to say real quick, and I want you to speak to this, Ronnie. I'm going to touch on it personally, and I want you to speak to it athletically. Be very careful communicating to people in a manner that you're asking things of them that you're not willing to do yourself. I think that it is imperative that we learn to convey our emotional and physical needs in a way that's practical, specific, and positive. We understand that relationships, personally or athletically, are about having needs met, but those needs, those wants, those desires, in order to be productive, in order to be effective, they must be conveyed in a way that's practical, specific, and positive, or the conversation is going to go south.
I swear you was just reading my mind, because my last 2 points I wanted to make about that, and I'm going to answer your question real quick, but I wanted to make this point real quick first about accountability, because you hit on something that was very important. And when we talk about accountability and communication, and I know you've heard this term before in sports, the eye in the sky doesn't lie. And when we talk about that, we're talking about, game film and stuff like that. So when you're going back watching stuff like that, one of the most important things for coaches to understand is that, when the day after a game, when you go in there to play, and one of the things I always did, like when our game tape was uploaded, was I went and watched all my plays. So I knew exactly, I knew exactly what plays the coach was going to point out. I knew exactly what I needed to do. So in my mind, I already knew when the coach pointed that play out, and if it was a bad play, I made the mistake. It was my fault. If the coach went out there doing it, I did it. So part of the player is taking accountability for your actions on the field or court or whatever the case may be. That camera ain't gonna lie. That camera ain't got no digital effect for it, when you're out there playing the sport. So as the player, having accountability, knowing that what your assignment was, where you were supposed to be, how did you execute it. As a coach, though, and I've seen this a lot, coaches will, when they're watching film and things like that, they'll point out a play, well, Ronnie, why did you do that? Or why did you take that step? Or why did you block that person? And, the player will explain why and stuff like that. And the coach just starts yelling, that wasn't your assignment. What was your assignment? Why did you have to do that? Stuff like that. It's one thing to, belittle a player, for making a mistake on film and things like that. It's another thing if you're going to critique that player but then offer up coaching behind that. That's effective communication.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's kind of like it's a fine line between, getting on that player but also belittling that player. That's why I said for me personally, I would hold myself accountable for the mistakes I made on film and stuff like that. Fine with all that. Not all, not all athletes are like that. Some athletes will still argue, well, coach, this happened and stuff like that. As the coach, when we come out with a game plan during the week and stuff like that, and we talk about executing that game plan to the best of our abilities, it's up to you to review with that player or that student athlete. Look, this was our game plan. This is how you executed it. This is how we need to execute it going forward so this doesn't happen again. So there's a fine line between that. To answer your question, as far as like, delivering a message and stuff like that, one of the things I wanted to share real quick was, when we're talking about communication, we've just been talking about linguistic communication and things like that. Which is verbal communication and things like that. And while verbal communication is extremely important, not only in sports and real life, you as the person, whether you're especially as a coach, understanding how you communicate. For example, just because you're a coach doesn't automatically mean you're this master teacher and things like that. There are some people out there, some athletes out here who know how to do it but can't explain it, and there are some athletes out here who can do it and can't explain it. I've had a coach in the past who could go out there and do it, but struggled communicating what we had to do. And as a result of that, we didn't have confidence in that coach, and it turned out that, it was kind of a negative situation where we weren't listening to the coach because he wasn't communicating with us to get through to us. But us as a unit, us as the offensive line, we were so close and we communicated so well that we just figured it out on our own. So you as a coach, understanding how your communication style comes across. If you struggle with linguistic communication, then that's something you need to work on. And my suggestion to that would be is if you struggle with verbal communication, when you do speak, have a message and have a point. Don't do all that useless talking, all that useless jabbering and gibbering and stuff like that. Have a message, have a point if you struggle with linguistic communication. Another thing that we necessarily didn't highlight, but it's extremely as important, is body language. And, me and you being mental health professionals, one of the things we're always taught about studying is body language, mannerisms, and things like that. As a coach, understanding your player's body language, and that's something that we all talk about, body language, bending over to catch your breath, putting your head down when something bad happens. Same thing works for coaches, too. Players see, like, if a player makes a mistake, like, I wish we could have had Jared on today because, Jared played a position that was solely dependent on, coach and player relationship, Jared being a quarterback. One of the things that Jared probably can speak on maybe next week is if Jared were to make a mistake during the play, the coach's body language towards him or Jared's body language coming off the field and the coach letting him know, like, look, you need to pick that up. You need to be able to, display this better because not only are you displaying poor body language to the coaches, you're displaying it to your teammates as well. So, having that self-reflection as a coach and player to know that my strong suit for communication and my weak points for communication is also important to building that trust and establishing that rapport amongst coaches and athletes as well.
Wow. Ronnie, we're out of time already. Goodness gracious. Time flies. But, wow, what a wealth of information we've shared today. Just a couple of key points real quick as we're closing out. We were talking about communication being key today, folks, on and off the field, the court, the baseball diamond, whatever it is you're doing. We want you to remember that, it really is all about intention. It's about your intentions. What is it that you're trying to communicate and why are you trying to communicate it? And really understanding the importance of speaking to be understood. What we didn't touch on today is written communication too. But I want to tell you, you can't unwrite it and you can't unsay it. So please, please, please take your communication effectively. Don't hesitate to join us next week. Tune in, log in, call in. We want to hear from you. We want to know that we're impacting you, that these discussions are making a difference and adding value to you. Until next week, this is House Talk Pregame with Dr. Lauren Pitts. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Have a good weekend, everybody. See y'all later.